It's a tragic story, and it's been a political football for the past week. I think it's telling that social media was being scrubbed from the law enforcement side to show that maybe the drills, the artificial intelligence, all of these other things that they're doing, not so effective. And I think it's a tactic that hasn't been used for 30 years. It's a pre-Columbine tactic not to have the police engage the active shooter. I mean, everywhere else in the world, it's taught that you engage the active shooter. I don't see how they couldn't see it was an active shooter situation when people were still being killed. I read through some of the texts, and there's multiple calls to 911 from kids' phones, from the dead teacher's phone. Only 8 kids are dead at some point early on in those texts. So it's tragic. It's still an ongoing, precipitating current event that we're learning more about. And yeah.
It's a complex situation. No denying that. At this
Waiting
point,
for the police to save you is proven in that case not to be an effective tactic. The mom that they handcuffed, who talked herself out of the handcuffs and then climbed the fence and went in and saved her kids, is something more people should understand. Like, that's
a true heroine. That's a true hero. That's someone who took matters into her own hands and recognized the immediacy of the situation and the tasing of
parents and the arresting of parents instead of dealing with the gunman.
Everything's backwards. At this point, I'm going to be careful to say, look, it seems to be a massive amount of incompetence. One of the things that does concern me, the time at which that went by, obviously
45 minutes to an hour and a half by some accounts.
Hear gunshots. Like, gunshots are quite loud. There's a shooting range down from where I live now, and I also practice being familiar with guns and being a gun owner myself. They're extremely loud. And you always wear ear protection. So, I mean, even for people around the vicinity, you know immediately it's an active shooter situation. The whole situation is beyond tragic. But when Luke went over the Buffalo shooting, like happened the week prior, a federal agent involved. Have we seen that before? I mean, I'm not saying
it's a pattern built out by the book The Terror Factory by Trevor Aronson. It's subtitled Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terror. Many such cases for budget justification, which goes back to Radowski bringing up Bill Binney, because in my interview with Binney, he says those groups don't want to solve these problems. They want the problems to grow bigger so they can keep getting bigger budgets. Yeah. And so if they can help to orchestrate things and have them happen on a certain useful schedule, that's a total plausible thing that goes on in world society. And then you can't leave it out of American society. Right? It's like when Putin says, in America, you guys don't have political assassinations. You have journalists commit suicide or wreck into trees or something like that.
And it took customs agents. So it took FBI overriding jurisdiction, not FBI, I'm sorry, federal agents, customs agents, overriding federal or essentially jurisdiction in Uvalde, I think is the name of the town.
Well, I think one of the stories was some of the cops pulled their own kids out while they were holding other parents back. So that's
sketchy.
Well, there's a lot of sketchy stories that have come out in the past week. There was a civilian
as well, a woman. Did you guys see that? She drove about 40 miles.
No. Is that the one that got handcuffed and then escaped the handcuff? Or
she talked to friends from local law enforcement to let the marshals to get the marshals to let her go, and then she snuck in, got her kids.
Oh, is that the one?
Got her kids out.
Yeah, with the dark curly hair.
Yeah.
I saw a picture over the other day. It's like a picture of courage.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
it's not for lack of equipment. I mean, just standard cops. Most places have bulletproof vests and automatic handguns.
But they're also trained. Let's go to Jocko Willenick real quick, because Jocko talks about this all the time, being a former Navy SEAL. He talked about having to train cops or the Army, or if you're going into the Rangers, you're going to become a Navy SEAL in the most extreme combat situations. You try to mimic the reality of the situation that you might experience. In other words, you try to create scenarios that might actually happen. So you can get used to hearing gunshots, hearing chaos, hearing screaming, seeing smoke, getting disoriented from all of the chaos of what's emerging at a crime scene or what's emerging at an active shooting scene. And he said one of the big problems essentially with cops, now SWAT is trained like that, from my understanding, to a certain extent. Obviously, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, those things as well. But police officers are not. In fact, police officer training is rather mundane and sort of bureaucratic. So there's not much involved in regards to knowing how to deal. Supposedly, now that they're supposedly trained for those situations, but I remember going back to the George Floyd situation, Jocko was on Joe Rogan talking about the issue of cops essentially not going through long training sessions, not having simulations run.
Cops being undertrained has been a chronic problem for a long time in a lot of places. But I guess my point would be this. If you got these black Bearcats and war machines and you guys look like special ops soldiers all dressed in black with your black cars and all this other stuff, then we're going to expect you to go into the line of fire and go get those kids out, please.
They just passed something in Texas about constitutional right to carry. Texas understands the importance of being armed individually, and yet there's always a pattern with these mass shootings where these individuals will go into areas where they know there are not going to be any guns.
Even in Texas, they have gun-free zones.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Those gun-free zones need to be better protected because, I mean, first off, the fact that the school's open, that's a little too convenient. I've seen that in other school shootings too. It's like, how you guys have this amazing security system and it's locked down all the time and parents have to call and like visually all this stuff to get in. All of a sudden in these situations, especially when it's convenient for the gun lobby. I don't know how that's working, right? The simultaneous events in public juxtaposed to K Street agendas and trying to have the United Nations disarm this country and every other English speaking country saying, America, why won't you give up your guns? Right. And there's been some really good memes about that, but this is not Australia. And this is, this is a place where if you're going to be a free human being, you need to be able to defend yourself against other people who would take away your freedom. And that might say, stay away from zones where people are purposely made vulnerable.
Yeah, that's right. Where they're being shepherded, where they're going to be called essentially over time.
If I have to walk into a place and I have to go through a metal detector, my first question is, why do I have to be here? What's going on here that I have to do this? And it's like okay,
a courthouse or something like that.
Or, sports events, things like that. I understand the need. They're trying to keep people safe, but that also sometimes make people sitting ducks and attracts predators who can violate those systems. Yeah. Use the thing that keeps people alive in that situation.
This is something.
And how did that situation end, by the way? They had to have some other people with guns to go in and get that person who didn't use it consciously.
Also, it's a
horrific situation.
Yeah, horrific is an understatement.
There's no justification for anything like that. I mean,
no, there isn't. This goes back to the documentary that we did together, that we filmed over July 4th weekend over 10 years ago now with John Taylor Gatto, where he mentioned in Tragedy and Hope, and I read the section when I first hosted GTW, talking about the paradox of being armed, and that at a time where the citizenry is well armed and well trained, there seems to be
low tyranny and despotism.
The only times liberty's ever appeared in human society is when the population is privately armed with deadly weapons. And to reach the acme of liberty, they have to have the same weapons available to them that the government has available to them.
Right? Isn't the quintessential fear in all those kind of Hitchcock, Friday the 13th thriller movies that there's somebody who should have the way to defend themselves, but they don't. So now they're going to get chased and probably butchered along with everyone else. And that's not like I wish it was just a fictional thing that happened in the movies, but there's lots of history to it. Address the causes of the mental illness that makes somebody go and do that situation. Because the flip side is, let's say you want the cops to go in and deal with it. Maybe they should act more like the Russians, where they just nerve gas the whole place, knock everybody out. Oh, yeah. And then maybe some of the people, they make it, some of them don't. I mean, they basically what they do in that movie Tenet, they did that for real. Like 10, 15, 20 years ago. That was Putin.
That was, for people who aren't aware, it was the Playhouse. Go ahead and
tell the hostage. Yeah. There was a hostage situation. Maybe there's like 800 people. You guys can look it up. And the way the Russians took care of it is they nerve gassed the whole place. They're just like, well, put everyone to sleep and then they'll go in and sort it out. Seems like a good plan on paper, but a lot of people didn't survive. tragic situations do go on like that. So you don't necessarily want to militarize the police even more. I would think you need to have a better early detection system and not have so much mental illness purposely sewn into our society through discordian ideas coming down through crazy contradictory policies pushed by taxpayer dollars. There's part of it right there.
I mean, that's part of the meaninglessness, the loss of purpose, loss of meaning to the individual that Peterson and others talk about. So that's the psychological malaise that's impacting and creating sort of unscrupulous individuals.
That dude had given up on himself.
Yeah, he gave up.
He didn't have that's not good. I don't see how there was gunshots going off outside the school and there wasn't a button that somebody pushes that locks the school.
I know, dude. All the technology that exists, they just had like a $700,000. It was something crazy. I heard it in passing on the news.
Similar to other situations.
Like all
we're
these.
not allowed to mention.
Yeah. That's why I'm careful what I'm saying here. There's a lot of anomalies. It does sound right now. I'm just going to say the judgment I'm going to draw from this is just unbelievable incompetence. And we should take a step back from the emotionally charged rhetoric about taking one's individual rights to bear arms and defend oneself and put it in historical context of what happens when you remove guns from situations when the individuals being able to defend themselves. We get, well, actually what Klaus
you get exactly what the World Economic Forum wants.
Yep.
Disarmed, toothless population that doesn't own anything and is completely subjugated and dependent on the set. Okay.